Welcome to the Cut to the Chase Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chase Younts, and tonight we've got a special guest on the program. He's the former Xavier censor from up in Massillon, Ohio. Kenny Frease joining the show. Kenny, it's been a minute since I've seen you, man. How things going?
Oh, it's going pretty good, man. Just kind of enjoying the slowness of the off season. Obviously you have the transfer portal and all that stuff. There's news coming out. That's kind of slowed down a little bit, especially for Xavier. They brought on, I think, 10 guys so far, maybe more at this point. I'm a little bit out of the loop. I tried to disconnect myself a little bit from it, but going through the summer, it's going to be fun watching that whole story progress with Pitino and just kind of seeing how that goes.
What were your initial thoughts when you saw Richard Pitino get hired, and now you're thinking, okay, he's got to go against Rick at St. John's, but what was the whole thought process right there when you saw it?
The St. John's matchup wasn't the first thing that came to my mind, but I think it was Fanta that brought it up first. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that is going to be a lot of fun. I mean, that's going to be a national media game, which isn't something that, outside of maybe UConn and Marquette, Villanova a couple years ago, like those national media games are big time. That's not something that Xavier gets a lot. So having that brand kind of come along with him was like secondary in the way that I was thinking in the beginning, because, I'm very excited about Coach Pitino, and I don't want that to get twisted at all, but everybody thought it was going to be Chris Mack.
Yeah.
And that was like almost like a 4 hours. It was like Chris Mack, maybe not Chris Mack. It's Pitino. They just announced it. And especially for me, Mack is part of that, that web of my Xavier time and like the people that I know and all that, my network. So it was like the initial thing was like, man, that I'm kind of losing touch with what Xavier is and being a part of the program and all that. But Pitino has come in and been awesome about that stuff. From the very first interview, he talked about, understanding the lore of Xavier basketball, the people that kind of built it. And, I'm not saying that I built Xavier basketball, but I was definitely a part of that ladder. You know what I mean? 100%. So it feels good to have that. It feels good to have that mindset coming in from the coach.
Yeah, and excuse me, it is downtown. I'm living downtown now, so getting used to all the loud noise here. Yeah. But again, I mean, looking at your career and everything, Chris Mack obviously took over as head coach in 2009, so he was your head coach for 3 years, and played a pretty big factor, and obviously your success and the team's success as well. But I do want to take it back a bit. All right, so Massillon, Ohio, you attended Perry High School. First off, any go-to spots when you're up in Massillon to go get some food?
Well, I mean, I don't think very many people are visiting Massillon. I shouldn't say that. Canton, the Hall of Fame's right next to us in Canton, so you get some tourism out here. But, I mean, man, there's a lot of places that I used to go to. I can think of a couple little spots that we used to go to that are no longer around. But there's a Mexican restaurant out here called El Campesinos that every single time Sean Miller and Chris Mack came into town, they were going to that place. It's really, really good Mexican food.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. I was actually planning a Hall of Fame visit here within the next month, so definitely.
Hey, let me know. I'll meet up with you, man.
Hey, that is all good with me. Shoot, we'll go around some basketball guys looking at football. But man, so when you went to Perry, I was looking at your stuff. Senior year, averaged 20 points, 12 rebounds, 3 blocks a game, first team All-State. It's just kind of an odd question, but was high school ball easy for you as a 7-footer and being able to dominate? I know it's an interesting line to kind of walk around.
I mean, I think in general, yes, high school basketball was easy. My coach had a lot of trust in me because of, he was my coach for 4 years. He actually came in when I was a freshman. So he kind of built that program around me for his first 4 years. So I had a really good relationship with him, and I had a lot of freedom, which was probably the most fun, I think, from just like a basketball standpoint, probably the most fun that I ever had playing basketball, still to this day, playing with all of my friends that I grew up with. And it was, it's just kind of before the game becomes a business. And it was a lot of fun. But I think the problem is that there was always something that teams were trying to do, whether that be, hold the ball for a whole quarter, or, I mean, we had games. I'm trying to think. Costa Koufis, that's a guy you would know. He played at Glen Oak. My junior year, his senior year. No, I'm sorry, my sophomore year, his junior year, he was injured. And the coach of that team, they had a good team, but they just didn't have a lot of guys around them. They were holding the ball. And I'm like, man, like we weren't doing this to you. You know what I mean? When I was injured, we weren't doing it. Was like it's crazy, man. We would have games that would end 6-2. It was like I had 6 points.
What the heck?
You know, it was crazy. So I mean, like that kind of stuff was frustrating. But you know, it is like that's the truest form of basketball. Do whatever you have to do to win. And like then that's what made high school basketball, and still high school basketball to this day is a lot of fun to watch for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, that making it a baseball box score is definitely something, man. That's insane. I mean, I know there's some teams that'll hold the ball and, you know, make it a 30 to 28 game. When you hear it as a single digit score, it's mind blowing. But
Glen Oak wasn't one of those ones that was that low. But I mean, I can think back to some teams that would do that stuff.
That's insane. But I mean, it goes back to you got to find a way to win a game in whatever way possible. But that's crazy. But how about your recruiting process in high school? Again, obviously you picked Xavier. We'll talk about that in a moment, but who were some schools that were looking at you, and what was that whole, process and timeline looking like your last couple years of high school?
Oh man. I got my first, Xavier was my first offer. Mm-hmm. That would have been as a rising, just when I became a freshman. Oh, wow. So like that was my first offer. I had a really good, Chris Mack used to talk about it all the time. There was this one time he was watching me play AAU, and somebody on my team missed a shot. The other guy got an offensive rebound, and I snatched it from him and jumped up and dunked on 2 people. And he was like, all right, this dude's going to be a high level D1 basketball player. And like, it was like right after that they offered me. And then it was like, as soon as that offer came in, it was just like one after another. My mom, I mean, people talk about like getting letters. You remember that in high school? It was like, oh, I got a letter from Wichita State or whatever it is. Like, you know, everybody gets real excited about it. I used to hate it because we would get, I mean, I had boxes of letters, like full on boxes of letters that we would just take out. We would just, my dad would take them out in the back and use them as kindling. You know what I mean? Like, but it was crazy. But so, I mean, Xavier offered, and then it was just like down the line. I mean, I had every single school in the country except for North Carolina, Kansas, and Duke.
I mean, still take that. I mean, that's incredible. And what was the big reason for Xavier? Like, was it the first offer, or was it other stuff that played in it with Chris Mack and everything else?
I mean, there was a lot of things. The relationships that I had with Mario and Coach Miller and Coach Mack, just I enjoyed the vibe of the campus. Obviously Cintas Center is, in my opinion, second to none. Like it's a pro style arena in college basketball at the time. It's in the A10. They're having trouble getting people to come in. We had one of the best recruiting classes in Xavier history. And, it was just like a lot of that kind of piled on to each other, but there were so many things, like my top 5 schools were Indiana, Kentucky, Notre Dame, Michigan, and Xavier. And I had, at the time, Tommy Amaker got fired. Ralph Sampson got fired. Tubby Smith got fired. And so it was like, okay, now it's down to Notre Dame and Xavier. And I grew up a huge Notre Dame fan. So, I like Coach Bray, he's an awesome guy. I had a lot of good meetings with him. I think, kind of sometimes you think about like, well, what would have happened if I'd have gone there? But, honestly, what it came down to was there were so many things that were so equal that for me, I wanted to be close enough that my family could come to games. We were like 3.5 hours away, and the drive to South Bend was like 5.5. So it really, like, as stupid as it sounds, it came down to that.
I mean, and sometimes in college decisions, it does come down to that. But again, I mean, you made an immediate impact. I just want to say one thing. I don't know if I told you this. I am a UC guy.
Okay.
But again, I'm not that type of guy that's going to bring up, arguments here and there and stuff like that. You literally lived that crosstown shootout rivalry. But just looking at your stuff, all right? So, like, the first 2 years, I would say more, coming off the bench, got a couple starts as a sophomore and stuff. But then really junior year and senior year was when you, like, truly emerged, when, honorable mention in the A10 back when Xavier was in that conference. And then the last 10 games of your career was a fantastic stretch. 3 times in the Sweet 16, 4 times in the NCAA tournament overall. What were, some of your what were some of your big moments for you, from a personal standpoint while at Xavier playing big time basketball?
I mean, I think kind of taking the good with the bad. You talk about my sophomore year, especially freshman year, I came in and, I was a role player, but, kind of one of the offensive options as the big guy. We had so many offensive options. I wasn't like a go-to guy or anything like that, but like if there was somebody who was getting a low post touch, like a lot of the times they would be playing offense, defense with me and Jason Love. We had, and Jason Love was a great guy to be behind as far as like his work ethic and just like what he taught me going through the whole process and just how to approach everything. Kansas State Sweet 16 game, that's probably one of the best college basketball games ever. I don't know if you know that game.
I've seen the highlights of it.
Jordan Crawford, Gus Johnson's on the call. Like it was insane, but I didn't get to play a lot in that game. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like a wake up call for me. Like, my body wasn't in great shape. I was overweight, like all that stuff. And it kind of just kicked me into gear. And then my junior year, I lost like 35 pounds. I came back, I came ready to go. And it was like that kind of stuff. Those were defining moments in my career, but just like good memory stuff. Like obviously beating Notre Dame in the round of 32 was awesome. And then getting the chance to play, instead of having to play Duke to go to in the round of 64, instead of having to play Duke in the round of 32, we played Lehigh. And because that was the year that CJ McCollum upset Duke. Yeah. And, it's cool too, because CJ grew up right next to me. He went to Glen Oak with Costa Koufos. So like me and him were playing against each other. And that was one of the best games of my career. That was a lot of fun, but, playing against Pitt, my freshman year, Dwan Blair, my coaches were hyping me up like crazy. And everybody and their mother thought that Dwan Blair was going to come in and just eat me alive. And I think in the first half of that game, I blocked him like 6 times. And it was like that kind of feeling was just crazy. Playing against Wisconsin, playing against Baylor in the Georgia Dome. Like this kind of stuff is just crazy, man. And I had so much fun, playing. Like I know that we're going to talk about NIL and stuff later, but like I bleed that school. You know what I mean? Like that's my home. So like, and that's what I was playing for.
Yeah. And I mean, again, like I've been to the Cintas Center a few times to see some games. Beautiful place. And then I've got a couple of friends that are at Xavier. It's basketball. And that's something that I truly do appreciate about Xavier University. I mean, it's and then just seeing, when I was younger, just like watching you guys play and everything. And it's like, man, Xavier's in the tournament again. Man, Xavier's making a deep run in the tournament once again. And it's like, I'm tuned in. I mean, this is some fun basketball to watch. But then like you talk about those moments, playing in a big time football stadium and, playing in a Sweet 16 or, playing the big time schools like a Wisconsin or anything like that. Gus Johnson on the call for a game. I mean, that's stuff that you're never going to forget for the rest of your life. And it's so fun to go back and get a chance to watch it. But also you remember the perspective of it or being on the court and being a big part of the game.
Yeah. And like just from that standpoint too, it's not something that you would expect from, at the time, what people were calling a mid-major school. Yeah. And I think like that mid-major, we kind of got rid of that real quick from like 04 to 08. And then, I came in, we went to 3 Sweet 16s and then they get a 1 seed a couple years after I leave. Like that, we dropped that a long time ago. But like, I just think from Xavier basketball in particular, I don't know that there's a better story of an ascension than Xavier basketball. Like you go from, in the 90s kind of just being a team in Cincinnati, they had their upsets and things against Cincinnati or against UC. Yeah. But like, you kind of start to see that rise start in the 90s. And then it was just like that ascension to, going from the A-10 to the Big East and being in a position to win the Big East, have 1 seeds, things like that in a 20-year span is crazy.
It's unbelievable. The exponential growth over time is something to behold at that rate. But I do want to ask before we shift off of talking about, your career, the A-10, obviously very, I know it's, mid-major conference, but super competitive. I mean, like bar none, but what was the most fun road environment to play in during a conference game back then?
Man, I mean, I think I'd probably have to go with Dayton because Dayton. I mean, Dayton was a big rival of Xavier, and like, I would, if I'm just being my troll self, I would say it wasn't really a rivalry. You know what I mean? Like that's where I'd go. But like, there's still Dayton still hasn't beat Xavier in Cintas Center since Jimmy Carter was president. Like that's crazy.
Pretty
right. So, like that was probably the most fun. But then, there was just, like Temple was always crazy. UMass was always crazy. Even when you would go play against George Washington or going to Olean and playing Fordham, like the gym is you're playing in a high school gym.
Yeah.
But like there's not a lot of fans there, but they're on top of you. And every single game in that league, we were the other team's Super Bowl. That we were the game they were selling out that year. So it was like we were taking everybody's best shot, and it was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, and I mean that's the game of college basketball. I mean you can't come out sleeping, on other nights because I mean a team could pop you if they're ready and you're not. I mean it might be lights out that night. So
we went and played. I said Fordham, didn't I? I didn't mean Fordham. I meant St. Bonaventure.
Oh, yeah, I got you. Yeah.
But Fordham was one of those teams though, where you would go in and they were like, top or bottom third of the league or whatever it was. And if they catch you on the wrong night where you're not ready to go in front of their home fans, I think we lost there at one time, maybe twice when I was there. But you just never knew what was going to happen. You had to bring your A game every night.
And that's the game of college, but that's the game of basketball in general. Right. But you just love it. And we'll say moving overseas career. So you played from 2012 to 2019 in Germany, Turkey. Am I missing any countries that you played in as well?
I played in Switzerland my last 2 years.
Okay. Yeah.
It was kind of a last ditch, just trying to find my spot. The game of basketball from the time I graduated high school until probably 2 or 3 years after I graduated college really changed a lot. It went to stretch 4, stretch 5, switching everything. I kind of got phased out of the game a little bit. Obviously I'm still going to have a spot somewhere. If I wanted to, I could still be playing if I wanted to, but it was just like, at a certain point I just had a kid, another kid on the way. Like it was just time to hang them up. At least I still got my, I've never really had knee or back problems, anything like that. So I got out before all that stuff started.
Hey, I mean, you can never go wrong with that, Right. I mean, because you see so many, big guys that have those type of problems, but I mean, to not have that issue or anything at the moment, I mean, that's big stuff. But, what is that life like as an overseas player? Like, it's obviously you're across the world, you're playing basketball. You're in a different country with, you're in the minority when it comes to language and everything else. What was that experience like maybe your first year or so?
Yeah. So when I first got over there, my wife, Emily, and I got married 3 months after we graduated from college. And I got over there on I want to say it was like August 3rd, 2012, something like that.
Yeah.
I fly out there. I'm by myself. She was coming in a couple months. I fly out there. I'm by myself. They take me to my apartment. They're trying to teach me to drive a stick shift car. I had never done that before. I was in a smaller town called Tübingen in Germany. It's a university town, but it's smaller in comparison to, even like Massillon, it's probably close to that size, I would say. And I laid down on the couch. The Olympics were on. I laid down on the couch and I was just like, you got to get me out of here. Like, I got to go home, and it was tough for the first couple of weeks, but then I kind of leaned on my teammates, the other Americans that were on my team. The Germans were great too. Don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of leaning on those guys that have had that experience. Josh Young he played for Drake. I don't know if you remember him at all, but he was our point guard, and he kind of just he pulled me out of my funk and was just like, hey, I understand. I understand what you're going through. Like, hey, come hang out with us. We'll do, go out to eat, do all this stuff, and just kind of get you acclimated. So he helped me out a lot. But then as like going forward, I started like cherishing the time over there. It was so much fun. The language barrier is never really a problem. Everybody speaks English, especially in Germany. Food's great. You're traveling, you get 2 or 3 days off and you're just taking a train to Paris. Like that stuff is awesome.
Again, like you mentioned, with playing in those big college basketball games and now traveling the world and playing basketball, stuff you will never forget for the rest of your life. But
absolutely,
transitioning into the media game, I mean, podcasting, Roll Blob podcast, working with the Field of 68. What was that like? And really getting into, the breakthrough into just, getting on the podcasting side of things.
Well, yeah, when I stopped playing in late 2019, I was like, man, I got to take a full reset, just like get out of basketball for a while. Because you start to become very jaded about something that you're a part of for a long time, because there's a very, very select group of people that are going to finish their career and be like, all right, it was time. You know what I mean? Like that's all I wanted from the game. So like, it came out and I was just like, I just need to take a second, get away from college basketball. I wasn't watching Xavier at the time. Like no NBA, no nothing. I was just done. And then just kind of slowly getting back into that. And then Coach Miller getting the job at Xavier 2 years ago, that was kind of like my wake up call to be like, hey, like this is a place that you love. It's a place that you still want to be a part of. And then Cap and Coop asked me to be on the podcast. We did it. I had a ton of fun with them. And I messaged them like 3 days later and I was like, hey, if you guys will have me, I'll be a host with you guys. Like, let's do it. Let's make this a big podcast. And, it's not like we're huge, but we're slowly growing, and then kind of got the opportunity with Field of 68. And that was a lot of fun. Really expanded my knowledge of what we need to do to be, or what I need to do to like really have an understanding and be able to talk about the game. So, that was kind of the process of that.
And it's always fun to see, former players talking about their experience and seeing what's happening now. It's always fascinating to see that, especially, from your perspective of things, and, talking about basketball here in the city of Cincinnati with Xavier, Big East, just everything else. And it's really cool to see. And that's another question of why I wanted to talk about the transfer portal. I mean, was there about how many people were in the transfer portal at like one time? There was definitely over 1,000 people. It was insane.
No, I think it was closer to 5,000.
I was gonna say, I know the opening of the transfer portal was ridiculous, and then it just kept growing and growing and growing, and it's numbers that you're like, is that correct? Is there a decimal in between that? It's unbelievable how that transfer portal impact was, because it was nowhere near like back then with the whole transfer stuff. But what were your initial thoughts as a guy that you see the portal come into play and you see how many people hop into it, and just your thought process on it?
I mean, at the risk of just sounding like an old guy that's like, that's not the way you should do it, because I do have that feeling in me a little bit. I'm getting to that old head age where I'm like, this is like, whatever. But, I think that they went from like the most restrictive they could be in the time that I was playing, where you couldn't even go out and get lunch with a booster, to they just took all the guardrails off. Everything's gone and you can do whatever you want. So it's, it's free agency every year. And at the end of the day, like there's not a lot of loyalty to programs left, which is a struggle for me. Especially having a rivalry like the Crosstown Shootout. Like you just never know on either side. Does this really matter to these guys, or are they just out here, collecting a paycheck? And I'm not pointing anybody out in particular, just, in general for all rivalries, not just Crosstown Shootout. So that part of it is the struggle for me, because if I was in the situation, I can't tell you what I would have done. Like if I have an agent telling me like, hey, get in the transfer portal, just see what your market is. I don't know if I would have been able to look at him and be like, no, I'm not doing that. I think that as a player, why wouldn't you? So that's the part that I struggle with. Like, I think that I really wish that they would have some type of guardrails put in place where, the big thing for us when I was playing was, a coach could leave, but you can't. So do the transfer portal. Let people enter the transfer portal. But you got to sit out a year unless your coach decided to leave the program. The coach that you came to the school for, if he decides to leave the program, you can transfer out and go play anywhere next year. But like, just put something in place to stop the madness of teams completely turning over every year. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that the general college basketball fan really likes that, and there's not a lot of connection with the players.
And like you mentioned, with, for example, being the crosstown shootout, the amount of players that played in this previous game, you think about 15 players on each roster. I mean, probably 75% of that game or 80% of the players from that game are on different teams this year.
Yep.
It's crazy to think about how that switch can happen in just the snap of a finger.
It's 100% of Xavier's team.
Well, and then it's a good chunk of Cincinnati team too.
Roddy is the only guy that's coming back, and he didn't play last year.
Yeah.
So at least he has an idea of what the environment's like.
Mm-hmm.
But they got Dante Jackson still. He's one of the assistant coaches. He played with me. He knows the meaning of that game. So hopefully he'll be able to drive that message home. But it's crazy, man.
It's crazy how things move. But it's like the transfer portal is one thing, and you have players that have hopped around to 3 or 4 different schools in 4 years, and that in itself is just a lot. Because if you think about it from the player's perspective, if you're going to a school where it's like, okay, I'm being told to hit the portal, go to this school, and then that doesn't work out, and I go to another school and another school, you don't really find a place that's home, and you just keep bouncing around. I'm not saying looking for like check and stuff, but it's like you're trying to find a home where you can play and be the best version of yourself, and that's got to be tough on a player's psyche and mindset, you'd think.
Yeah, I mean, but then there's also the standpoint of, if you go somewhere and it does work out, that just makes your value higher the next year in the portal. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like, who am I, with the rules that are in place, who am I to sit here and be like, that you shouldn't be doing that? Like, go get paid.
Yeah.
You have 4, I mean, not all the COVID years guys are kind of phasing out now.
Mm-hmm.
You have 4 or 5 years to make as much money as you possibly can. And in the situation we're in right now, like, go do it. I mean, I guess I don't know what else to say, because who am I to tell somebody not to go make money? But I wish that there was something in place that would kind of slow it down a little bit. Because I think if you control, I was talking to somebody the other day, kind of controlling how often people are able to transfer will kind of keep that NIL from going too crazy. Because I don't know if you can really control that as much as they would want to.
Yeah, because people talk about having a cap, but at the same time, it's like there's conferences that have so much, schools have so much money. You're talking about like an Ohio State has a ridiculous amount of money compared to a smaller school like a St. Bonaventure. Like, they have different amounts of money, and it's not like there's an even playing. It's not an even playing field at all. It's if you're a good mid-major player, you're going to go up and try to get a chance up at the bigger school, and it just kind of like the trickle down effect and going up effect. So it's interesting to see how that is. But when you talked about the the NIL and stuff, it's like there was absolutely all the restrictive things, and then the doors were blown open and there were no rules at all. It's just interesting to see how the NCAA is like, okay, maybe we need to, they blew it up to try to build it back together instead of just slowly letting the gates open. So I think the process of how they did that was really confusing at the time.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I, in some ways, and I've said this a couple times on different podcasts and stuff, like, in some ways I feel like the NCAA, I mean, I think their hands are tied. I think that they're going through a lot of issues with lawsuits and different things that players and, through the years have kind of built all of this up. But part of it to me feels like they were like, hey, this is what you guys wanted. Here you go. You know what I mean? Like all the people calling for players need to get paid. Hey, you know what? This is what you guys have been asking for. Here it is. And I really don't know what the future of college basketball is going to look like. College sports in general. I think that revenue sharing is going to, well, you know, if it passes, revenue sharing is going to even the playing field slightly, because I think that will give them the clearance to kind of put a stop to this, like, just pay for play NIL, because at the end of the day, NIL was supposed to be, hey, you've had 10 really good games this year. You're starting to look like you might be the face of the team. Here's $10,000. Come hang out at my car dealership for a little bit. It wasn't supposed to be GMs and collectives and fans donating to the collective and, you know, generating millions of dollars to give to players. That's not what it was meant to be. But with the way that the rules shook out, that's exactly what it turned into. It's
turning into, as I said, it's trying to mock pro sports in a way. It's turning into that. And, you know, these are also 18, 19-year-old kids they're trying to make the best way possible. But, you know, it's going to be
think about what it's like to be an incoming freshman trying to get a spot on a team. Unless you're like a top 5, 10, maybe even 15 guy, what team is going to go after you, a guy that they've watched you play against high school players? What team's going to go after you rather than a guy that they watched play in the Big East last year and, you know, was third team all Big East or whatever it is, and come in and show that you're already proven? So now you have like the MAC, which used to be one of the most fun conferences to watch. And like some of those teams, they got good because they were developing players, making runs to, you know, the tournament, to get into the Sweet 16 or round of 32. That happened because they were developing guys. And now it's basically just turning into a tryout to get into one of the Big Four conferences.
It's insane how things have gone. And the transfer portal, you get older quicker. And that's how teams have tried to do their thing. But we've run out of time here. But Kenny, thanks again for coming on the show. It's always good talking to you, man. But, you know, just again, Kenny's doing the roll blob and Field of 68, everything else. He's, you know, doing a lot of good stuff in the media world as well. But, you know, Kenny, once again, thanks for coming on the show. And we will see you guys next time here on the Cut to the Chase Sports Podcast. Have a great night.